and welcome to Peter Presents Iliad, episode 16, where we go through book 16. Now, I'm pretty excited. Things have been really heating up in the Trojan War. It really seems like for most of the 9 years they've been there, they weren't necessarily fighting that much. They were taking long breaks, but now everything's reaching a peak so far for them. The Trojans have smashed through the Greek barrier, pushed their wall down, come over the trench in their chariots, and are fighting up in and amongst the ships with the Greeks. They're trying to set them on fire to cut them off. Now, Achilles is still sitting out of the fight just over at his tent with his Myrmidons, the special forces of the Greeks. So, with that, it seems we should probably just get on with it, with this special Sweet 16 episode. So, alright. Here we go, everybody. Oh, and real quick, sorry, doing the mug thing again. This week, I'm using one of my favorite mugs that I have, which is a little picture of me that a friend got me at Disney. And on the back, it has a fairly good motto. There you go. Never grow up. So special thank you to Maria for getting me this mug years ago when I was in college. She's an animator and just a super talented person. So thank you. I think of you every time that I use this mug. So, and I'm using tea, I'm drinking tea today. And let me check the chat real quick, make sure everything seems to be in order. Alright, there we go. Yeah, everything seems to be okay. And with that, Greeks and Trojans, let us begin. While they fought for this ship, Patroclus came to Achilles and stood by him weeping, his face like a sheer rock where the goat trails end and dark spring water washes down the stone. Achilles pitied him and spoke these feathered words. "What are all these tears about, Patroclus? You're like a little girl pestering her mother to pick her up, pulling at her hem as she tries to hurry off and looking up at her with tears in her eyes until she gets her way. That's just what you look like, you know. You have something to tell the Myrmidons? Or myself? Bad news from home? Last I heard, Menetius, your father, and Peleus mine were still alive and well. Their deaths would indeed give us cause to grieve. Or are you broken-hearted because some Greeks are being beaten dead beside our ships? They had it coming. Out with it, Patroclus. Don't try to hide it. I have a right to know." And with a deep groan, you said to him, Patroclus, "Achilles, great as you are, don't be vengeful. They are dying out there. All of our best, or who used to be our best. They've all been hit and are lying wounded in camp. Diomedes is out, and Odysseus, a good man with a spear. Even Agamemnon has taken a hit. Eurypylus, too, an arrow to his thigh. The medics are working on them right now, stitching up their wounds. But you are incurable, Achilles. God forbid I ever feel the spite you nurse in your heart. You and your damned honor. What good will it do future generations if you let us go down in this defeat in cold blood? Peleus was never your father, or Thetis your mother. No, the gray sea spat you out onto crags in the surf with an icy scab for a soul. What is it? If some secret your mother has learned from Zeus is holding you back, at least send me out. Let me lead a troop of Myrmidons and light the way for our army, and let me wear your armor. If the Trojans think I am you, they'll back off and give the Greeks some breathing space, what little there is in war. Our rested men will turn them with a shout and push them back from our ships to Troy." That was how Patroclus, like a child begging for a toy, begged for death. And Achilles, angry and deeply troubled. "Ah, my noble friend, what a thing to say! No, I'm not in on any divine secret, nor has my mother told me anything from Zeus. But I take it hard when someone in power uses his authority to rob his equal and strip him of his armor. I take it hard. The girl the Greeks chose to be my prize after I demolished a walled city to get her, Lord Agamemnon, son of Atreus, just took from my hands as if I were some tramp. But we'll let that be. I never meant to hold my grudge forever. But I did say I would not relent from my anger until the noise of battle lapped at my own ship's hulls. So it's on your shoulders now. Wear my armor and lead our Myrmidons into battle. If it is true that a dark cloud of Trojans has settled in over the ships and the Greeks are hemmed in on a narrow strip of beach, the Trojans have become cocky, the whole city, because they do not see my helmeted face flaring close by. They would retreat so fast they would clog the ditches with their dead if Lord Agamemnon knew how to respect me. As it is, they have brought the war to our camp. So Diomedes is out, huh? It was his inspired spear work that kept the Trojans at arm's length. And I haven't been hearing Agamemnon's battle cry as much as I hate the throat it comes from. Only Hector's murderous shout breaking like the sea over the Trojans, urging them on. The whole plain is filled with their whooping as they rout the Greeks. Hit them hard, Patroclus, before they burn the ships and leave us stranded here. But before you go, listen carefully to every word I say. Win me my honor, my glory and my honor from all the Greeks, and as their restitution, the girl Briseis, and many other gifts. But once you've driven the Trojans from the ships, you come back. No matter how much Hera's thundering husband lets you win, any success you have against the Trojans will be at the expense of my honor. And if you get so carried away with killing the Trojans that you press on to Troy, one of the immortals may intervene. Apollo, for one, loves them dearly. So since you have made some daylight for the ships, you come back where you belong. The others can fight it out on the plain. O Patroclus, I wish to Father Zeus and to Athena and Apollo that all of them, Greeks and Trojans alike, every last man on Troy's dusty plain were dead. And only you and I were left to rip Iliad down, stone by sacred stone. And while they talked, Ajax retreated. Zeus saw to it that everything the Trojans threw at Ajax hit him, and his helmet tickered and ranged from all the metal points its bronze deflected from his temples and cheeks. His left arm was sore from holding up his shield, but the Trojans could not, for all their pressure, force it aside. Gulping in air, sweat pouring down his limbs, he could scarcely breathe and had nowhere to turn. Tell me now, muses who dwell on Olympus, how fire first fell on the Achaean ships. It was Hector who forced his way to Ajax's side, and with his heavy sword lopped through the ashwood shaft of his spear at the socket's base, sending the bronze point clanging onto the ground far behind him, and leaving in Ajax's hands a blunted stick. Ajax knew that this was the work of the gods, that Zeus had canceled Ajax's battle plans and planned instead a Trojan victory. No one could blame him for getting out of range, and when he did, the Trojans threw their firebrands onto the ship, and she went up in flames. Achilles slapped his thighs and said, "Hurry, Patroclus, I see fire from the ships. Don't let them take the fleet and cut off our escape. Put on the armor while I gather the troops." And so Patroclus armed, putting on the bronze metalwork tailored to the body of Aeacus' swift grandson, the greaves trimmed with silver at the ankles, the corselet spangled with stars, the silver-studded sword, the massive shield, and the crested helmet that made every nod a threat. He took 2 spears of the proper heft, but left behind the massive battle pike of Aeacus' incomparable grandson. No one but Achilles could handle this spear, made of ash, which the centaur Chiron had brought down from Mount Pelion and given to Achilles' father to be the death of heroes. Patroclus left the horses to Automedon, the warrior he trusted most, after Achilles, to be at his side in the crush of battle. Automedon led beneath the yoke the wind-swift horses Xanthus and Balius, immortal horses the gods gave to Peleus when he married Silver Thetis. The harpy Podarge had conceived them when the west wind blew through her as she grazed in a meadow near Ocean's stream. As trace-horse Automedon brought up Pedasus, whom Achilles had acquired in the raid on Aeacian city, this faultless animal, though mortal, kept pace with immortal horses. Achilles toured the rows of huts that composed the Myrmidons' camp, and saw to it the men got armed. Think of wolves, ravenous for meat. It is impossible to describe their savage strength in the hunt, but after they have killed an antlered stag up in the hills and torn it apart, they come down with gore on their jowls, and in a pack go to lap the black surface water in a pool, fed by a dark spring. And as they drink, crimson curls float off from their slender tongues. But their hearts are still, and their bellies gorged. So too the Myrmidon commanders, flanking Achilles' splendid surrogate, and in their midst stood Achilles himself, urging on the horses and the men. Achilles had brought 50 ships to Troy. Each ship held 50 men, and the entire force was divided into 5 battalions, whose 5 commanders answered to Achilles. Menestheus led the 1st battalion. His mother, Polydore, a daughter of Peleus, had lain with the river god Spercheius, whose sky-swollen waters engendered the child. His nominal father was a man called Boros, who gave many gifts to Mary Polydore. The 2nd battalion was led by Eudorus, Polymele's bastard son. This woman once caught Hermes' eye as she danced in Artemis' choir, and the god later went up to her bedroom and slept with her. The son she bore shone like silver in battle. After childbirth, Actor's son, Achilles, led her to his house in marriage, and her father, Phylas, kept the boy and brought him up as if he were his own. Pisander led the 3rd contingent. He was next to Patroclus, the best of all the Myrmidons with a spear. Old Phoenix led the 4th contingent, and Alcimedon, Laerces' son, the 5th. When Achilles had the troops assembled by battalions, he spoke to them bluntly. "Myrmidons, I would not have a man among you forget the threats you have been issuing against the Trojans from the safety of our camp while I was in my rage. All this time you have been calling me the hard-boiled son of Peleus and saying to my face that my mother must have weaned me on gall, or I wouldn't keep my friends from battle. That, together with hints you'd sail back home, if all I was going to do was sit and sulk. Now, however, that there is a major battle to hold your interest, I hope that each of you remembers what it means to fight The speech steeled their spirits. The Myrmidons closed ranks until there was no more space between them than between the stones a mason sets in the wall of a high house when he wants to seal it from the wind. Helmet on helmet, shield overlapping shield, man on man, so close the horsehair plumes on their bright crests rubbed each other as their heads bobbed up and down. And in front of them all, two men with one heart, Patroclus and Automedon, made their final preparations to lead the Myrmidons into war. But Achilles went back to his hut and opened the lid of a beautiful carved chest his mother, Thetis, had put aboard his ship when he sailed for Troy, filled with tunics and cloaks and woolen rugs, and in it, too, was a chalice that no one else ever drank from, and that he alone used for libation to no other god but Zeus. This chalice he now took from the chest, purified it with sulfur crystals, washed it with clear water, then cleansed his hands and filled it with bright red wine. And then he prayed, standing in his courtyard and pouring out the wine as he looked up to heaven. And as he prayed, Zeus, in his thunderhead, listened. Lord Zeus, god of Dodona, Pelasgian god, who dwells afar in the snows of Dodona, with your barefoot priests who sleep on the ground around your sacred oak. As you have heard my prayers before, and did honor me and smite the Achaeans, so now too fulfill my prayer. As I wait in the muster of the ships and send my Patroclus into battle with my men, send forth glory with him. Make bold the heart in his breast, so that Hector will see that my comrade knows how to fight and win without me. And when he has driven the noise of battle away from our ships, may he come back to me, unharmed and with all his weapons and men. Zeus, in his wisdom, heard Achilles' prayer and granted half of it. Yes, Patroclus would drive the Trojans back from the ships, but he would not return from battle unharmed. Achilles placed the chalice back in the chest and stood outside his hut. He still longed to see the grim struggle on Troy's windswept plain. The Myrmidons under Patroclus filed out and swarmed up to the Trojans. Boys will sometimes disturb a hornet's nest by the roadside, jabbing at it and infuriating the hive, the little fools, until the insects become a menace to all and attack any traveler who happens by, swarming out in defense of their brood. So too the Myrmidons. Patroclus called to them over his shoulders, "Remember whose men you are, and for whose honor you are fighting. And fight so that even wide-ruling Agamemnon will recognize his blind folly in not honoring the best of the Achaeans. For Achilles!" This raised their spirits even higher. They were all over the Trojans, and the ship's hulls reverberated with the sounds of their battle cries. The Trojans, when they saw Patroclus gleaming in his armor, fell apart, convinced that Achilles had come out at last, his wrath renounced and solidarity restored. Each of them looked for a way to save his skin. Patroclus' spear shot out like stabbing light to where the Trojans were clustered around the stern of Protesilaus' ship, and hit a certain chariot commander named Pyrocles, a Paeonian who had led a contingent of chariots from the Axius River in Amydon. He went down, groaning in the dust, with Patroclus' spear in his right shoulder. Having lost their leader and best fighter, the Paeonians panicked, and Patroclus drove them from the ships and doused the fire. The half-burnt ship was left there. The Trojans, frantic and screaming, were on the run, and the Greeks poured in with an answering roar. Zeus will at times rain in his lightning and remove a dense cloud from the mountain top, and all the crests and headlands and high glades break into view, and brightness falls from the air. The Greeks had repelled the enemy fire from the ships and could catch their breath, but only for a while. The battle was not over. The Trojans had withdrawn from the black ships, but were not giving up. They had taken a stand and would have to be pushed back by force. The fighting was scattered at first, as heroes killed each other in individual combat. Menoetius' brave son struck first, hitting Areolycus in the thigh just as he turned. The bronze sheared through the flesh and shattered the bone. He pitched forward into the dirt. Then the warrior Menelaus drove his spear into Thoas' chest, where it was unprotected by his shield. As Thoas sagged to the earth, Phyleus' son was watching Amphiclus bear down on him, but beat him to the punch, getting his spear into the thick muscle at the base of his thigh. The point skewered the sinews and split them, and Amphiclus blacked out. Then Nestor's son, Antilochus, sliced into Autumnius' flank with his bronze spear and drove it through, sending him sprawling. Maris wasted no time getting his spear between Antilochus and his brother's corpse, but Thrasymedes, another of Nestor's sons, was even quicker. Thrasymedes' spear blade cut through Maris' arm, where it joined the shoulder, neatly flaying the muscle off and crushing the bone. He fell heavily, eyes leaning into the dark. So these two brothers, killed by brothers, entered the undergloom, comrades of Sarpedon, spearmen sons of Amisidorus, who had reared the raging Chimera, an evil for many. In the confusion, Oilean Ajax jumped Cleobulus, taking him alive, and in the same instant ending his life with a sword stroke to the neck. The blade ran warm with blood up to the hilt, and death's haze lay heavy on his eyes. Peneleos and Lycon both cast, both missed, both drew their swords and charged each other. Lycon's sword landed hard on Peneleos' helmet, but the heavy crest shattered the blade to the hilt. Peneleos' sword caught Lycon under the ear and sliced through the neck, leaving only a ribbon of skin from which the head dangled. Lycon collapsed in a heap. Meanwhile, Meriones, sprinting hard, caught up with Acamas as he was mounting his chariot and nailed him in his right shoulder. He fell from the rig and mist poured over his eyes. Idomeneus plugged Eurymus' mouth with cruel bronze, the spear point passing beneath the brain pan, shattering all the bones. His teeth rattled out. His eyes filled with blood, and he spurted blood out through his nostrils and gaping mouth until death's black nimbus enveloped him. In this way, each Greek leader took out his man. Wolves will unerringly pick off lambs or kids that have become separated from the flock through the shepherd's lack of attention, the marauding predators making swift havoc of the defenseless young animals. So too the Greeks had their way with the Trojans, whose only tactic now was dishonorable flight. All this time, Big Ajax was trying to get a shot off at Hector, who, knowing the ways of war, kept his shoulders under his ox-hide shield and listened for the whistling of arrows and thud of spears. He knew the fight was not going his way, but he held his ground and tried to save his friends. A cloud detaches itself from Olympus and moves across the clear blue sky when Zeus is about to unleash a storm. The rout from the ships had begun, and in no good order. Hector's horses got him across the trench, but he left his army behind it. The Trojans drove team after team into the trench, only to see the horses break their poles, struggle free, and leave their lords stranded in their chariots. Patroclus called his men in for the kill. The Trojans were screaming and running in every direction, while a cloud of dust rose high over their horses as they left the ships behind and strained for the city. Patroclus drove his chariot to wherever the routed Trojans were thickest, shouting as he plowed over broken chariots and the drivers who fell beneath his wheels. The horses the gods had given to Peleus jumped the trench in one immortal leap, and Patroclus steered them after Hector, in whose back he longed to plant his spear. But Hector's horses had too big a lead. When the storm finally breaks on a day during harvest, the black earth is soaked until it can hold no more, and still the rain comes down in sheets as uses judgment on men who govern by violence and drive justice out with their crooked verdicts, as if they have never heard of an angry god. All the rivers flood their banks, and every hill is rutted with torrents that feed the rivers, and down from the mountains the waters roar and sweep men's tillage into the shining sea. The Trojan mares were thundering down the plain. Patroclus let them go, but when he had cut off the foremost battalions, he hemmed them back toward the ships, blocking their frantic retreat toward the city, and in the space defined by the ships, the river, and Troy's high wall, he made them pay in blood. Pronoeus was first, Patroclus' spear hitting him like searing light where his shield left part of his chest exposed. His limbs were unstrung, and he fell with a thud. Thestor, son of Enops, was next, crouching in his polished chariot basket, half out of his mind with terror, the reins slack and trailing out of his hands. Patroclus eased up alongside him and shattered his right jaw with his spear, driving the point through his teeth. Then, gripping the shaft, levered him up and over his chariot rail, the way a man sitting on a jutting rock with a fishing rod flips a flounder he has hooked out of the sea. So Thestor was pried gaping from his chariot and left flat on his face. His soul crawled off. Euryalus Patroclus got with a stone as he charged, crushing his helmet and skull. Death sifted around him as he pitched to earth. And then, in quick succession, Patroclus killed Eurymus, Amphiterus, Epaltes, Echius, Pyrrhus, Tlepolemus, son of Damastor, Iphias, Aeopus, and Polymnius, Argeus' son, making Troy's rich earth fat with their blood. Sarpedon saw his comrades running, with their tunics flapping loose around their waists, and being swatted down like flies by Patroclus. He called out, appealing to their sense of shame, "Why this sudden burst of speed, Lycian heroes? Slow down a little while I make the acquaintance of this nuisance of a Greek who seems by now to have hamstrung half the Trojan army." And he stepped down from his chariot in his bronze, as Patroclus, seeing him, stepped down from his. High above a cliff, vultures are screaming in the air as they savage each other's craws with their hooked beaks and talons. And higher still, Zeus watched with pity as the two heroes closed, and said to his wife, Hera, who is his sister too, "Fate has it that Sarpedon, whom I love more than any man, is to be killed by Patroclus. Shall I take him out of battle while he still lives, and set him down in a rich land of Lycia, or shall I let him die under Patroclus' hands?" And Hera, his lady, her eyes soft and wide. Son of Kronos, what a thing to say. A mortal man whose fate has long been fixed, and you want to save him from rattling death? Do it. But don't expect all of us to approve. Listen to me. If you send Sarpedon home alive, you will have to expect other gods to do the same and save their own sons. And there are many of them in this war around Priam's great city. Think of the resentment you will create, but if you love him and are filled with grief, let him fall in battle at Patroclus' hands. And when his soul and life have left him, send sleep and death to bear him away to Lycia, where his people will give him burial with mound and stone, as befits the dead. The father of gods and men agreed, reluctantly, but shed drops of blood as rain upon the earth in honor of his own dear son, whom Patroclus was about to kill, on Ilion's rich soil, far from his native land. When they were close, Patroclus cast and hit, not Prince Sarpedon, but his lieutenant, Thrasymachus, a good man, a hard throw into the pit of his belly. He collapsed in a heap. Sarpedon countered and missed. His bright spear sliced instead through the right shoulder of Pedasus, who gave one pained, rasping whinny, then fell in the dust. His spirit fluttered off. With the trace horse down, the remaining two struggled in the creaking yoke, tangled the reins. Automedon remedied this by drawing his sword and cutting loose the trace horse. The other two righted themselves and pulled hard at the reins, and the two warriors closed again in mortal combat. Sarpedon cast again, another miss. The spear point glinted as it sailed over Patroclus' left shoulder, without touching him at all. Patroclus came back, leaning into his throw, and the bronze point caught Sarpedon just below the rib cage, where it protects the beating heart. Sarpedon fell, as a tree falls, oak or poplar or spreading pine, when carpenters cut it down in the forest with their bright axes to be the beam of a ship. And he lay before his horses and chariot, groaning heavily and clawing the bloody dust. Like some tawny, spirited bull, a lion has killed in the middle of the shambling herd, groaning as it dies beneath the predator's jaws. Thus beneath Patroclus the Lycian commander struggled in death, and he called to his friends, "Glaucus, it's time to show what you're made of, and be the warrior you've always been, heart set on evil war. If you're fast enough, hurry, rally our best to fight for my body. All the Lycian leaders. Shame on you, Glaucus, until your dying day if the Greeks strip my body bare beside their ships. Be strong and keep the others going." The end came as he spoke, and death settled on his nostrils and eyes. Patroclus put his heel on Sarpedon's chest and pulled out his spear. The lungs came out with it, and Sarpedon's life. The Myrmidons steadied his snorting horses. They did not want to leave their master's chariot. Glaucus could hardly bear to hear Sarpedon's voice. He was so grieved that he could not save him. He pressed his arm with his hand. His wound tormented him, the wound he got when Tokar shot him with an arrow as he attacked the wall. He prayed to Apollo, Lord of bright distances. "Hear me, Lord Apollo, O Lord, wherever you are, in Lycia or Troy, for everywhere you hear men in their grief, and grief has come to me. I am wounded, Lord, my arm is on fire, and the blood can't be staunched. My shoulder is so sore I cannot hold a steady spear and fight the enemy. Sarpedon is dead, my lord, and Zeus will not save his own son. Heal my wound and deaden my pain, and give me the strength to call the Lycians and urge them on to fight, and do battle myself about the body of my fallen comrade." Thus Glaucus' prayer, and Apollo heard him. He stilled his pain and staunched the dark blood that flowed from his wound. Glaucus felt the god's strength pulsing through him, glad that his prayers were so quickly answered. He rounded up the Lycian leaders and urged them to fight for Sarpedon's body, then went with long strides to the Trojans, to Polydamas, Agenor, Aeneas, and then saw Hector's bronze-strapped face, went up to him and said levelly, "Hector, you have abandoned your allies. We have been putting our lives on the line for you, far from our homes and loved ones, and you don't care enough to lend us aid? Sarpedon is down, our great warlord, whose word in Lycia was Lycia's law, killed by Patroclus under Ares' prodding. Show some pride and fight for his body, or the Myrmidons will strip off the armor and defile his corpse in recompense for all the Greeks who have been killed by the ships." This was almost too much for the Trojans. Sarpedon, though a foreigner, had been a mainstay of their city, the leader of a large force and its best fighter. Hector led them straight at the Greeks. "For Sarpedon!" And Patroclus, seeing them coming, urged on the already eager two Ajaxes. "Let me see you push these Trojans back with everything you've ever had and more. Sarpedon is down, first to breach our wall. He's ours to carve up his body and strip the armor off, and all his little saviors are ours to massacre with cold bronze." They heard this as if hearing their own words. The lines on both sides hardened to steel. Then Trojans and Lycians, Myrmidons and Greeks began fighting for the corpse, howling and cursing as they threw themselves into the grinding battle, and Zeus stretched hellish night over the armies so they might do their lethal work over his son. The Trojans at first pushed back the Greeks when Epigeius was hit, Agacles' son. This man was far from the worst of the Myrmidons. He once lived in Boeotium, but having killed a cousin of his, came as a suppliant. To Peleus and silver-footed Thetis, who sent him with Achilles to fight at Troy. He had his hand on the corpse when Hector brought down a stone on his head, splitting his skull in two inside his heavy helmet. He collapsed on Sarpedon's body, and death drifted over him. Patroclus ached for his friend and swooped into the front line like a hawk over sparrows. "Yes, my Patroclus." And they scattered like birds before your anger for your fallen comrade. Sthenelaios, Ithame's beloved son, never knew what hit him. The stone Patroclus threw severed the tendons at the nape of his neck. The Trojan champions, including Hector, now withdrew about as far as a javelin flies when a man who knows how to throw it hard in competition or in mortal combat. The Greeks pressed after them, and Glaucus, the Lycian commander, now wheeled around and killed Patroclus, a native of Hellas and the wealthiest of the Myrmidons. He was just catching up with Glaucus when the Lycian suddenly pivoted on his heel and put his spear straight into Patroclus' chest. He fell hard, and the Greeks winced. A good man was down, much to the pleasure of the Trojans, who thronged around his body. But the Greeks took the offensive again, and Meriones killed Laogonus, a priest of Idaean Zeus, who was himself honored as a god. Meriones thrust hard into his jaw, just beneath the ear, and he was dead in the hated dark. Aeneas launched his spear at Meriones, hoping to hit him as he advanced under cover of his shield. But Meriones saw the spear coming and ducked forward, leaving it to punch into the ground and stand there quivering, as if Ares had twanged it so it could spend its fury. Aeneas fumed. "That would have been your last dance, Meriones, your last dance, if only my spear had hit you!" And Meriones, himself famed for his spear. Do you think you can kill everyone who comes up against you, Aeneas, and defends himself? You're mortal stuff, too. If I got a solid hit on you with my spear, you'd be down in no time. For all your strength, you'd give me the glory and your life to Hades. Patroclus would have none of this, and yelled, "Cut the chatter, Meriones! You're a good man, but don't think the Trojans are going to retreat from the corpse because you make fun of them. Use hands in war, words in council, save your big speeches. We've got fighting to do." And he moved ahead with Meriones, who himself moved like a god in his wake. Woodcutters are working in a distant valley, but the sound of their axes and of trees falling can be heard for miles around in the mountains. The plain of Troy thrummed with the sound of bronze and hide stretched into shields, and of swords and spears knifing into these. Sarpedon's body was indistinguishable from the blood and grime and splintered spears that littered his body from head to foot. But if you have ever seen how flies cluster about the brimming milk pails on a dairy farm in early summer, you will have some idea of the throng around Sarpedon's corpse. And not once did Zeus avert his luminous eyes from the combatants. All this time he looked down at them and pondered when Patroclus should die. Whether shining Hector should kill him then and there in the conflict over godlike Sarpedon and strip the armor from his body, or whether he should live to destroy even more Trojans. And as he pondered, it seemed preferable that Achilles' splendid surrogate should once more drive the Trojans and bronze-helmeted Hector back to the city and take many lives. And Hector felt it, felt his blood turn milky, and mounted his chariot, calling to the others to begin the retreat that Zeus' scales were tipping. Not even the Lycians stayed, not with Sarpedon lying at the bottom of a pile of bodies that had fallen upon him in this node of war. The Greek stripped at last the glowing bronze from Sarpedon's shoulders, and Patroclus gave it to some of his comrades to take back to the ships. Then Zeus turned to Apollo and said, "Sun god, take our Sarpedon out of range. Cleanse his wounds of all the clotted blood, and wash him in the river far away, and anoint him with our holy chrism, and wrap the body in a deathless shroud, and give him over to be taken swiftly by sleep and death to Lycia, where his people shall give him burial with mound and stone, as befits the dead." And Apollo went down from Ida into the howling dust of war, and cleansed Sarpedon's wounds of all the blood, and washed him in the river far away, and anointed him with holy chrism, and wrapped the body in a deathless shroud, and gave him over to be taken swiftly by sleep and death to Lycia. Patroclus called to his horses and charioteer, and pressed on after the Trojans and Lycians, forgetting everything Achilles had said, and mindless of the black fates gathering above. Even then, you might have escaped them, Patroclus, but Zeus's mind is stronger than men's, and Zeus now put fury in your heart. Do you remember it, Patroclus? All the Trojans you killed, as the gods called you to your death. Adrastus was first, then Autonus, and Achilles, Parimus, son of Megas, Epistor, Melanippus, Elasus, Mullius, and last Pylartes. And it would have been more, but the others ran back to Troy, which would have fallen that day by Patroclus' hands. But Phoebus Apollo had taken his stand on top of Troy's wall. 3 times Patroclus reached the parapet, and 3 times Apollo's fingers flicked against the human's shield and pushed him off. But when he came back a 4th time, Like a spirit from beyond, Apollo's voice split the daylight in two. "Get back, Patroclus! Back where you belong. Troy is fated to fall, but not to you, nor even to Achilles, a better man by far." And Patroclus was off, putting distance between himself and that wrathful voice. Hector had halted his horses at the western gate, and was deciding whether to drive back into battle or call for a retreat to within the walls. While he pondered this, Phoebus Apollo came up to him in the guise of Asius. This man was Hector's uncle on his mother's side, and Apollo looked just like him as he spoke. "Why are you out of action, Hector? It's not right. If I were as much stronger than you as I am weaker, you'd pay dearly for withdrawing from battle. Get in that chariot and go after Patroclus. Who knows? Apollo might give you the glory." Hector commanded Cabriones, his charioteer, to whip the horses into battle. Apollo melted into the throng, a god into the toil of men. The Greeks felt a sudden chill, while Hector and the Trojans felt their spirits lift. Hector was not interested in the other Greeks. He drove right through them and straight for Patroclus, who leapt down from his own chariot with a spear in one hand and in the other a jagged piece of granite he had scooped up and now cupped in his palm. He got set, and without more than a moment of awe for who his opponent was, hurled the stone. The throw was not wasted. He hit Hector's charioteer, Cabriones, Priam's bastard son, as he stood there holding the reins. The sharp stone caught him right in the forehead, smashing his brows together and shattering the skull so that his eyeballs spurted out and dropped into the dirt before his feet. He flopped backward from the chariot like a diver, and his soul dribbled away from his bones. And you, Patroclus, you, my horseman, mocked him. "What a spring the man has! Nice dive! Think of the oysters he could come up with if he were out at sea, jumping off the boat in all sorts of weather, to judge by the dive he just took from his chariot onto the plain." And with that, he rushed at the fallen warrior like a lion who has been wounded in the chest as he ravages a farmstead, and his own valor destroys him. Yes, Patroclus, that is how you leapt upon Cabriones. Hector vaulted from his chariot, and the two of them fought over Cabriones, like a pair of lions fighting over a slain deer in the high mountains, both of them ravenous, both high of heart. Very much like these two human heroes, hacking at each other with bronze, Hector held Cabriones' head and would not let go. Patroclus had hold of a foot, and around them Greeks and Trojans squared off and fought. Winds sometimes rise in a deep mountain wood from different directions, and the trees, beech, ash, and cornelian cherry, batter each other with their long, tapered branches, and you can hear the sound from a long way off, the unnerving splintering of hardwood limbs. The Trojans and Greeks collided in battle, and neither side thought of yielding ground. Around Cabriones many spears were stuck, many arrows flew singing from the string, and many stones thudded onto the shields of men fighting around him. But there he lay, in the whirling dust, one of the great, forgetful of his horsemanship. While the sun still straddled heaven's meridian, soldiers on both sides were hit and fell. But when the sun moved down the sky and men all over the earth were unyoking their oxen, the Greeks' success exceeded their destiny. They pulled Cabriones from the Trojan lines and out of range, and stripped his armor. And then Patroclus unleashed himself. 3 times he charged into the Trojan ranks with the raw power of Ares, yelling coldly, and on each charge he killed 9 men. But when you made your 4th demonic charge then, did you feel it, Patroclus, out of the mist, your death coming to meet you. It was Apollo, whom you did not see in the thick of battle, standing behind you, and the flat of his hand found the space between your shoulder blades. The sky's blue disk went spinning in your eyes as Achilles' helmet rang beneath the horse's hooves and rolled into the dust. No, that couldn't be right. Those handsome horsehair plumes grimed with blood. The gods would never let that happen to the helmet that had protected the head and graceful brow of divine Achilles. But the gods did let it happen. And Zeus would now give the helmet to Hector, whose own death was not far off. Nothing was left of Patroclus' heavy battle spear but splintered wood. His tasseled shield and baldric fell to the ground, and Apollo, prince of the sky, split loose his breastplate, and he stood there, naked, astounded, his silvery limbs floating away, until one of the Trojans slipped up behind him and put his spear through a boy named Euphorbus, the best in his age, with a spear, mounted or on foot. He had already distinguished himself in this war by knocking 20 warriors out of their cars, the first time he went out for chariot lessons. It was this boy who took this chance at you, Patroclus, but instead of finishing you off, he pulled his spear out and ran back where he belonged, unwilling to face even an unarmed Patroclus, who staggered back toward his comrades, still alive, but overcome by the god's stroke and the spear. Hector was watching this, and when he saw Patroclus withdrawing with a wound, he muscled his way through to him and rammed his spearhead into the pit of his belly, and all the way through, Patroclus fell heavily. You could hear the Greeks wince. A boar does not wear out easily, but a lion will overpower it when the two face off over a trickling spring up in the mountains they both want to drink from. The boar pants hard, but the lion comes out on top. So too did Hector, whose spear was draining the life from Menoetius' son, who had himself killed many. His words beat down on Patroclus like dark wings. So, Patroclus, you thought you could ransack my city and ship our women back to Greece to be your slaves. You little fool. They are defended by me, by Hector, by my horses, and my spear. I am the one, Troy's best, who keeps their doom at bay. But you, Patroclus, the vultures will eat you on this very spot. Your marvelous Achilles has done you no good at all. I can just see it. Him sitting in his tent and telling you as you left, "Don't bother coming back to the ships, Patroclus, until you have ripped Hector's heart out through his bloody shirt." That's what he said, isn't it? And you were stupid enough to listen. And Patroclus, barely able to shake the words out, "Brag while you can, Hector. Zeus and Apollo have given you an easy victory this time. If they hadn't knocked off my armor, I could have made mincemeat of 20 like you. It was fate, and Leto's son who killed me. Of men, Euphorbus, who came in third at best, And one more thing for you to think over. You're not going to live long. I see death standing at your shoulder, and you going down under the hands of Peleus, perfect son. Death's veil covered him as he said these things, and his soul, bound for Hades, fluttered out resentfully, forsaking manhood's bloom. He was dead when Hector said to him, "Why prophesy my death, Patroclus? Who knows? Achilles, son of Thetis, may go down first under my spear." And propping his heel against the body, he extracted his bronze spear and took off after Automedon. But Automedon was gone, pulled by immortal horses, the splendid gifts the gods once gave to Peleus. And that was book 16. Wow. So, Patroclus is dead. Now, I had talked about Patroclus once before, but there's some things that I want to tell you about. Patroclus, of course, is the best friend of Achilles. Achilles even says, "I wish everyone were dead so that you and I could just take apart that city stone by stone." They had spent long, difficult nights at sea. They had fought together and probably with each other. But here we're getting a glimpse. I'm going to give a glimpse into another aspect of the ancient Greek world, which is that Achilles and Patroclus had both taken women from cities. But Patroclus and Achilles, friends, brothers, but they were also lovers. Patroclus and Achilles were lovers. And some people debate that, but that's because they haven't read this book as thoroughly as I have. And it's really clear. The way that the ancient world worked with that, particularly in the Greeks, relationships between men were more common. The Spartans, as I think I mentioned before, in their military society, you weren't allowed to get married to a woman until you were 30 and moved out of the barracks. You lived in the barracks with the other guys, and the guys took lovers with each other. And this is something that is pretty messed up. But a lot of the older Spartans would take younger boys as, quote, lovers. And so this was such a big part of that culture that a Spartan woman on her wedding night, knew that this was going to happen, her friends, with her foreknowledge, would kidnap her and shave her head and put her in boys' clothes. And she would be put into the dark room waiting for her husband. Her head was shaved because that was the hairstyle that boys in Sparta had. And she wore boys' clothes. And she did all this to make it easier for her husband to make love to her. and he would sneak into the room at night. Everyone knew he was going to do it, but you weren't supposed to get caught. And if you were married before 30, actually, you didn't live with your wife. You didn't move out of the barracks till you were 30. So I think you could get married before that, but you couldn't live with your wife. So you had to sneak over to her place at night, and don't get caught. Everybody knows you're doing it, but it was just, sneakiness was encouraged in Sparta, including stealing. Little boys were encouraged to steal, but if they got caught, they were hurt badly. And so the relationships there are a little, that's how they were. Now, there's some more to that kind of thing, where the Greeks had, like, older men would take younger boys as lovers, actually, as a pretty common thing throughout a lot of Greece, particularly teachers and their apprentices. And there were all these, like, weird social rules about it. I mean, obviously that in itself is a weird social rule, but it was a thing where they would it was like you the only thing that was looked at as shameful pretty much about sex in Greek life was if you were the one being penetrated. So it's but with Patroclus, so, like, are you a bottom or a top? And but a lot of relationships that men had while they were lovers and they were sexual didn't involve that, which is interesting. So yeah, hey, this isn't for kids. I've said that since day one a million times. But anyway, what do we see else in this book? Hector is gonna try and cheat fate, and Zeus wouldn't stop fate for his own son, Sarpedon, who he loved more than any other man alive. But another thing that's interesting here is that Zeus takes the body, has Apollo take the body away and bury it. Burial rites are important. Honoring the dead is important, even to the gods. And now this war that started as a squabble, or, you can argue how it started or what they're fighting over, with, like, is it Aphrodite and Hera's fault? Is it and Athena's fault? Is it Paris's fault? Is it Helen's fault? Is it Eris's fault, who made the apple? All that stuff. Whose fault is all this? And but burial rites are important, and this thing started as a little squabble, perhaps, and now it has slowly reached up to heaven, and it has affected Zeus, the one who was neutral and staying out of all of it and just doing his job. And now Zeus is weeping blood onto the earth. And now the man who signifies the idea of glorious war and the fun and the action and all that stuff, Achilles, who is fighting the idea of Hector with war is hell. Achilles has never lost someone to war. It's like it's not real to him. He just always wins, and all of his guys are the best. And he just lost Patroclus. This whole thing, this whole book, this particular book, which starts after a lot of things have happened, begins with Achilles losing some honor and some pride and clout and a girl that he loves. But he's, there's something to be said for this is worse. This is a lot worse. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Achilles responds to that. This war between mortals where the gods are playing games is reaching up to heaven, and now has just touched Zeus and also divine Achilles. Wow. So anyway, that's a lot of interesting information for you. Let me go on into the chat. Okay, so once again, thank you for being active in the chat, guys. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun for me, even if it's like not a question or something. If you're just like, "Ooh, that hurt," or something, I love it. So heckling is fun. So, all right, Bubba the musician, kicking us off here, says, "I'm here a few minutes early today. Good job, Bubba. Well done." All right, Awim Awap said, "Heard about this." Bubba the... Oh, I think we have a new viewer here. Bubba the musician says, "Where did you hear about it? In the jungle? The mighty jungle?" Awim... Awim Awap. Awim Awap says, "Along, Awim away. So what time does it start?" And then Joe says, "Let's rock." Bubba the musician says it should start any moment. And then he says, "How's that for timing?" So it must have started right as he said that. Joe says, "That's so funny that they tell soldiers to stop the smack talk. It's interesting that when a leader is felled that the armies generally retreat instead of flying into a rage to avenge their hero. But I guess I can see where it would crush your spirit too." Yeah. Awimawap says, "So Hector knew Patroclus' name? Achilles, I get." Yes, yeah. So all these guys know each other by this point. That's one of the things that's so weird about this war, is that the Greek camp is like 4 kilometers away from Troy, and they've been fighting for 9 years. And the whole idea is that everybody wants glory. They want their name heard. And yeah, everyone knows who Achilles is. Everyone knows who Hector is, but they also know who Ajax is. They do know who Patroclus is. I mean, it's not like this is the first time he was fighting, and he just killed a ton of people. And everybody knows that, hey, that's Achilles' best friend, lover, comrade person. So yeah, everybody would know that is pretty reasonable. So like pretty much all these guys know each other. They get intelligence on each other. They talk to each other. They learn about each other's family history. So it's a weirdly social war. It's very strange. But like this actually isn't a totally unique thing, because the even in like World War II, like different generals, they study the other side. They know who's in command over there. They know their names. They know their war history. It's like, it's not just Patton knew who Rommel was. Like, it was pretty normal for all of them to know about each other. If you take something like the war between the states, the Civil War, you've got everybody in command there pretty much, went to West Point. And most of them were taught by Robert E. Lee. I'm saying most. That might not be true. But, like, these people were in school together in that war. So, people knowing who's on the other side is actually not a weird thing. Now, in America today, we might think that's a little odd because we've only heard the names of, like, 3 or 4 terrorists that we've been fighting for the last 10 years. We got Osama bin Laden, we've got Alar Baghdadi or whatever, and, like, a couple other guys, But, we just have these faceless, terrorist, villain, whatever things. We don't know who they are. But that's actually not super normal to that degree anymore, as much as it was. You know what I mean. Anyway, so Joe says, "A lot of interesting artistic moments where Homer almost pauses for detailed metaphors of nature to describe both the action and the people." Yeah, Homer must have spent a lot of time in nature. Like, one of my favorite ones from this chapter is where the wolves that have just killed something come down the mountain and they lap up water, and as they do that, blood from their tongues and jowls curls off into the water. I'm like, yeah, that guy was definitely sitting somewhere and a pack of wolves came by, So I like to think maybe he heard that somewhere. I don't know. But let's see. Joe once again says, e.g. Example: snarling wolves, bears, lions, storms, oh my's, winds, raging water. Yeah. Even flipping flounders. Yep. Yeah, the fishing. So Bubba says, yeah, Patroclus' death is going to be a bad thing for the Trojans. Yeah, I think that's going to be a bad thing for everybody. All lives matter, sorry. That's it's gotta be bad. He knew who he was, and that's how it went. Oh, Bubba comes in with another last minute comment here. It says General Armistead and General Hancock were close friends. This is pointed out in the movie Gettysburg. Yeah, so the movie Gettysburg is a good movie. I personally don't like, it doesn't matter what I don't like at the moment when it comes to that. There's a performance in that movie that I don't like very well, but there are so many great performances in it. Oh my gosh, Jeff Daniels as, not Charlemagne, wow. The main guy. Yeah, he's fantastic. I can't believe I'm blanking on names. This is what's weird about doing shows that are live, is that I suddenly don't remember stuff I know. But anyway, yeah, I'm sure Bubba will say who that is. But there's people with the war between the states, especially. Now, that was a civil war, which is a little different than this Trojan War that's going on, obviously. But yeah, there were a lot of people who were close friends who knew each other. People in the north and the south would like visit each other. They had friends up north. They had friends down south. They knew like, okay, we're going up against the Maine division, and they'd be like, I have a friend in Maine. You know, I might see him, and then they might see him, and yeah, Chamberlain. That's right. I thought Charlemagne. I'm like, that's not right. Yeah, so Chamberlain. Jeff Daniels plays Chamberlain, and he's fantastic in it. Pretty much everybody, almost everybody, does a fantastic job in Gettysburg. I highly recommend the movie. It's pretty accurate. There's a couple things I wish they had also done, but the movie's like 3 hours long anyway, so yeah, whatever. Can't do everything, I guess. All right, so with that, that's it for tonight's show. Now, this Thursday, we might not be having an episode. Might, I don't know. I might be traveling that day. I will make a post that evening if I am not doing a show, and of course I will post it if I am. It's possible that we will do this show on Thursday. I'll just be somewhere else. But we'll see. We'll see if we can do that. But we might be taking a break this Thursday. So thank you very much, and if we don't get together Thursday, I'll see you on Monday, same time, same station. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me for this episode. I think we really had a bit of a cracker this time. We've had a lot of the monotony of war. Like, it's still been exciting, but it's just back and forth, and now, you know, a new challenger has entered the battlefield, and oh no, things are about to get, well, we'll see. Anyhow, thank you very much for joining me once again, everybody. Have a wonderful night. I hope you enjoyed your drink of whatever you had with you, snuggled in. Thanks for spending this time. Thanks for being in the chat, and I'll hopefully see you at the very latest this Monday evening on Peter Presents Iliad. Bye-bye-bye.